Welcome to Recross the Paths, where we celebrate the Cube community one conversation at a time. My name is Cade. My guest today is Dan. Dan, thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so excited to talk about your cube, one of your cubes. You have
One of my,
many.
I have a few.
You have greater than one.
I'm greater than one. Yeah, as most people do, I think.
Yeah, it's like you can't stop at just one, like
Yeah,
Pringles.
yeah.
But the cube we're going to dive into today, we're going back to the wasteland. We're going into the desert. I guess it is sort of a desert, right?
Yeah, all the requirements of a desert cube. Yeah, totally. Yeah, so this is the Mad Max cube. So I based it off of like the desert cube that I believe Andrew's the guy's name
That's
who
right.
put. So building off of that, I sort of turned that into a tribute to one of my favorite movies, or movie series at this point, I guess, and have been kind of running with it from there.
Very exciting. Well, we're definitely going to dive further into the Mad Max Cube. Dan, to help lay the foundation and get us prepped for this journey, how did your journey begin? Why Cube?
People on the show have said this before, but the cube is the most punk rock of ways to play Magic. I mean, it's super community based, it's anti-capitalist. We share with everybody. Anybody can show up. Everybody drafts. All of those, I guess, affirmations drew me to it. I am lucky enough to be a sometimes participant in a larger cube drafting group in Philadelphia, which has just been awesome and super welcoming community. And we get to just draft a huge variety of environments, and it's a lot of fun. I've played a lot of different environments. I started playing Magic during Revised, which was when I was in middle school that came out. And a cousin of mine had one of those like old like booster packs that you would get like 60 random cards, and we just like shuffled out 30 each and figured out how to play the game that way.
Like a starter deck duel sort of thing.
Yeah, but like it was just the starter pack. It was totally randomized. The lands did not match up with the spells that were in it. We were like tapping our Llanowar elves when they first came into play and like fireballing each other's graveyards, and it was a mess, but we had a lot of fun.
That's so good.
Yeah, and I think like, so that means I was playing and like buying cards during Fallen Empires and Ice Age and stuff, and like when the game was really starting to kind of, change and become something a little bit different than like the original Richard Garfield designs and stuff. And I just remember like we played Magic in so many different ways. I mean, like groups of friends would play like you'd play the five-player Magic where you're against.
Pentagon or like Emperor
Yeah,
type.
yeah. So, we played it like that. We played free for all the time, like during lunch at school. And I just remember like there was this one format that I played once, and it was the worst format ever, but it just like kind of lit it like a design fire under me, where InQuest magazine, which was like I don't know, like the only way to get information about cards other than like the Wizards of the Coast publications at the time.
Oh, yeah. Like that in a Scry magazine.
Yeah, yeah. Put out like a fan-made format specifically for Fallen Empires, like famously the worst set ever. They made this game called The End of the World, where basically there was a shared monocolored deck. All of the cards, other than the lands, were listed as either a neutral card, a feral card, or a like civilized card, or something ridiculous like that.
Whoa.
It was supposed to go with the flavor of the card. So, the goblins were the feral ones and the dwarves were the civilization for red. And there was a shared hand that anyone could play from at any time, which made counter magic just ridiculous. And everyone had their own hand, and you shared lands. Land destruction didn't work. And like I tried it once. I don't even think we finished the game. It was the worst format ever, but it was just like such a like weird and wild way to play that a lot of my friends like I mean we had our decks that were whatever the standard of the time decks or whatever, but like we goofed off and like tried to like use magic cards for other things. We definitely tried like Dungeons and Dragons, but like the wizards had magic cards instead of like the spells listed in the book and stuff. So yeah, I was in a group of people tinkering with the game from pretty early on.
And that's pretty wild. I mean, like, we talk about some rules modifications, but that Legends variant sounds like unhinged. That's
It was.
totally.
It was. And terrible. Like I can't imagine they play tested it all that much, because like the decks that they recommend, like the magazine came with a suggested red deck, and there was no way the dwarves could win. Like it was stacked so heavily against them.
That's so wild. But then that means you really kind of started not just playing the game the way that it was intended, quote unquote, but like already breaking the rules from very early on.
We definitely were breaking the rules from when we start. I mean, I think I learned how to play the game like a couple months in.
So you have this background of, yeah, I mean, I don't want to say kitchen table in a pejorative way there, like,
Very kitchen table.
just casual get together, play whatever seems most fun or most wild at the time. Like, did you continue in that thread or did you branch out into other spaces?
I mean, I took, like as most people do, like took breaks and stuff and sort of came in and out. But I did like drafting quite a bit. I think that my first draft, I think, was around like the Torment era. And that was just with a bunch of friends. We just ended up with a bunch of packs and, gave it a shot. And around like 2003 or so, I was in college and didn't have any money. And some friends of mine and I like really wanted to draft. And like, so we just grabbed my old like box of, old cards at that point and just like kind of shuffled up random cards and would sort of make what we thought a pack would be comprised of and drafted those, which that's kind of cube-ish, I guess. I mean, it wasn't curated in any way. So draft has been kind of a center bit of the way that I like to play the most. And sort of came back to Magic pretty seriously around like 2010 and then took another break and then around 2016 I've been playing pretty consistently from there. Again, like mostly formats that I can draft in some way. And a lot of that has been just retail draft. But yeah, so I think like when someone introduced me to Cube not too long after Amonkhet came out, I was like, oh, this is cool. Like I like this. Because it felt like it was kind of bringing in like the bits and pieces of like, weird designs and personalizing, but in a more fun way than I think EDH ends up being or Commander usually ends up being. But it's also a draft. So yeah, I liked that a lot. It kind of stuck with it.
So you got to experience Cube in the most recent return to form.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to then jump into designing your own?
Let's see. So, Tolarian Academy Community College, that
Clarion
one.
Community College, yeah.
Tolarian Community College, there you go. There's an episode on Cube that like talks a little bit about designing them and I think gives some recommendations for a skeleton. And I just started throwing together like my first list of what felt like it was going to be something like a vintage cube, but like cards I could actually afford, and filled around with it from there a little bit. And then I think like that felt like around the time that I started listening to some podcasts and stuff. And I know a lot of folks kind of advocating for something above and beyond just like a vintage cube, but like, try something else. And and I got really into just some of the art from Amonkhet really kind of brought me back to like movies that I'd really enjoyed as a kid, like sort of the like 80s adventure movies and The Mummy and like, a lot of those stuff, like even the older versions of that and stuff, like really kind of brought me back to that and kind of got me thinking about like, well, what can you do? And I saw the desert cube list and like there are not many deserts on it. I was like, wait, why is this a desert cube? Um, so that kind of got me thinking and I started just fiddling like after I'd sort of built my initial cube and had, drafted it a few times with friends and family and stuff and had a good time with it. I started thinking about like what's another direction we could take this in, and then started flipping through old cards and seeing like a lot of the old like soldiers art from like the invasion block and stuff. And I was like, okay, this feels like Mad Maxy to me. And I really liked those movies and like Fury Road had just come out. So, I was like, recently excited about that. And there were vehicles now and stuff. So, the more I sort of thought about it, the more it felt possible. And I mostly just started putting the cube together based on art, like the art on the cards, and was started just making a, I guess, more thematic cube. And then the more I sort of thought about it and put cards together, some of the mechanics sort of started to emerge just as I was putting that list together.
It's interesting to me that like you're inspired by the artwork there when I think to so many of the old arts, kind of the pulp
Mm.
fantasy stuff from the early days, like when you were starting, and especially in that like Torment block, Odyssey block.
Yeah.
And the thing you were most inspired by, it's like, hey, we had Amonkhet, and then all of a sudden that clicked for you.
Yeah. I don't know. That's what it was. That's what caught me. Yeah, and I think like also like Amonkhet had some cool mechanics that did really kind of feel. I mean, like in the story itself, like it is, it's this desperate society, and they're surrounded by, an impassable desert, and there's these like powerful gods that are fiddling around with them and stuff, cycling, and there's so much of it that just sort of like just a slight reskinning. They're driving around in vehicles, with shotguns at their hips, and their world is fire and blood.
It's a great hook, right? Really evocative.
Yeah.
So why Mad Max? Dan, of all the post-apocalyptic wastelands we could celebrate?
So my mom is the exact right age to think that Mel Gibson is the most attractive human being who's ever been born. And as a kid in the 80s, when a Mad Max movie came out, like it was an event in my house because like she had to watch them. I mean, like, we were very much like a fantasy sci-fi household. And she dragged my sister and I to see Beyond Thunderdome when it came out. And I think I was like 7 or something like that when that movie came out, like
You had to
in
be,
the
like,
theaters.
snuck in
What?
a trench coat,
Right, yeah,
basically.
yeah, right. Like, what is this? I got really into it, and every once in a while you'd catch one of the older ones, like on rerun or whatever. So of course I never saw like the full original. There was commercial breaks and all sorts of nonsense for all of them, or you'd start watching it halfway in, and so they were just sort of like really intriguing stories from my childhood that I never felt like I got all of. So I
Mm.
kind of filled in, like it was a fun space to play in because I could like fill in, like I've never seen the first half hour of Road Warrior, sort of guessing how he gets there. So yeah, like that was just sort of a mainstay. And then eventually I did actually fully watch all the movies and got very excited when they started, when George Miller started making new ones. And actually, when Furiosa came out, that sort of precipitated a pretty significant shift in the cube, sort of as I was taking some of the themes from that movie and trying to build it in also.
Well, let's use that as a jumping off point here. But first, and you've already kind of introduced it a little bit, could you give us the elevator pitch for the Mad Max cube?
Yeah, so Mad Max Cube, so it's a desert cube. It's a desert cube where the conceit is that there's no deck building. It is a wildly and intentionally imbalanced format. So it's full support for the Mardu colors. There are about half as many blue cards as there are any other colored cards, and only, I believe, 4 or 5 green cards. It intentionally under supports and land and is very like artifact and vehicle heavy, obviously. And the no deck building requirement means that everyone's playing a 45 card deck. So, you're used to trying to make it up to 17 lands, but people are always getting caught because like actually you need 19 or 20 given your deck size. And there's only enough, since I used the original Desert Cube as my skeleton for it, and I kept the land count the same. So there are only 17 lands per drafter. So it's a little bit short on that. And the intention is that like you'll end up with dud cards in your deck. I mean, like, sometimes there's sand in the gun and it doesn't go off, and sometimes, you're out of gas. And so that's part of the simulation aspect of it, is that you're not just desperate for resources, but I think it makes the draft more exciting. I think like watching other people drafting it is a lot of fun because like people are agitated and excited and like really engaged during the draft portion. And that feels competitive also because, there's sort of the like wait to see who blinks and starts taking lands first kind of element of it. And I think that that sort of makes it a little bit fun, at least for me, it makes it a little bit more fun throughout because you're feeling pretty desperate from the beginning and under-resourced intentionally. The other thing to keep in mind is that there's half as many blue cards as you expect, half the support for that, only a few green cards, no way to produce green mana that comes from a land. You have to like do some sort of shenanigans with creatures or tapping an artifact for mana or something like that. So there are cards that are very hard to cast in it, and that's intentional.
It's so good. It's gotta be such a tough balance to find how do you thread that needle between friction and frustration in an environment like that? Where it's like you want
Yeah.
people to have enough of a deck, like a functional deck to compete, but you could potentially crash and burn to carry the metaphor here before the game start.
And that's part of the joy of it. I mean, I think I am pretty careful, like when I bring it out to like a draft night with people who I don't know. I'm usually pretty clear, like, and even ahead of time and saying, and like letting people know, like take a look at this list. Like, you got to know what you're signing up for. And I definitely never like, I don't take offense when people get up off the table and like, okay, cool, I'm gonna go find something else. Um, because that's perfectly reasonable. But I think like, presenting it that way sort of like lets people know like this is part of the fun. And like, in other cubes you have your O3 draft, but you still had a good time. And this one, like you had your absolute train wreck of just the draft portion, and like that's part of the fun. Looking at your deck and you're like, I can't cast 6 of these cards.
And I know there are a couple ways to mitigate a little bits of that, but
Mhm.
to not move too far away from you were talking about when Furiosa came out that there was this change in tone and like how much of this cube is based on aesthetics. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, totally. I mean, like I said, like I started it with aesthetics in mind. And I think like the biggest restriction that I've held myself to pretty consistently is the art for it and the creature types. I often get recommendations for folks of like this cool card, and it's like, yeah, but there's a goblin in that art. Like there's no goblins in Mad Max. Like, or that creature type, like that's an elf. I can't play that. That's not a human. Or, I'm allowed one dog and like a few lizards. Like it's pretty like lizards, insects, one dog, and then only humans are the only. And I've recently started accepting some mute. I think there's like one mutant now that's very human looking that I've put in.
Mutant also feels very Mad Maxy. Like you'd
It
buy that
does,
in the
yeah.
universe.
Well, that's another Furiosa thing. Like once I don't know how much I should talk about a movie that maybe not everyone has seen, but like there's a scene where Furiosa, the main character, wakes up and is with this older couple of like that are sort of human looking, but are very like they're clearly something else is going on there. And they're at least very unhealthy looking. And it, like the art, I feel like of some of the cards kind of reminiscent of that. But yes, I mean, like, and I think like that's really an aesthetic thing. Like that's not a particularly mechanic. Like there's no humans kindred deck in the cube. But I think like just sort of sticking to aesthetics has really kind of kept me honest with it. And also like really it has made maintaining the cube a little bit easier. Like a set comes out and there's like at most two cards from any new set that I could conceivably put in it. So it's easy to kind of maintain. And I think it's also kind of like pointed me towards the mechanics that I really want to use. So, just the idea of like cycling and a heavy artifact theme and equipment and vehicles have been pretty big, like, limiting the number of flyers, really only like vehicle flyers, just like trying to find ways to make cycling work for different types of decks has been kind of fun and I think like has kind of given some structure to the cube that's been easy to sort of build the mechanics out, like sort of starting with the aesthetics of it and sort of building mechanics from that.
Yeah, so nowadays, as the cube has grown and evolved, mutated, maybe we should say, is the mechanical side still subservient to the flavor, or does it go both ways now?
I feel like it kind of goes both ways now. I've been trying to work a mill deck into the cube for quite a while now and have really not been super successful with it. I did recently get a fun recommendation for Riverside Monument.
The River Churn from
Riverside Monument, yeah.
yeah, from this racing set, Ether Drift.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Ether
it's like
Drift.
very verdant though, right? Like water flowing
It
from the
is. It is, but it looks a lot like Immortan Joe's settlement, like
sure.
with the waterfall and stuff. So like, and again, like that's another one where I sort of gave myself permission to it because in Furioso you can see like there are things growing up there. Like it's there are gardens and there's a tree on the very top of it and stuff. So it's like, okay, well, like I'm sort of pushing back a little bit on the aesthetics there because that is kind of making that and Whetstone and like just a few other cards are sort of giving me a mill deck that feels like it might actually work sometimes now. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a push and pull.
Thinking of the art, just since you mentioned it there, have you considered altars at all?
Well, so I use a few secret layer cards, but I feel like if I'm doing altars, then that just like I worry that it would just turn into just a vintage cube. If anything, as long as I'm sharpening, some spikes and mohawks on everybody. Um,
That's a great point. Yeah. Like you could make Ragavan fit in this universe, just
yeah, exactly. Yeah, whatever. He's fine. He steals stuff.
Well, speaking of aesthetics, I think we probably ought to talk about your box.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so the cube is it's stored unsleeved and it's in a military surplus ammo box. So it's, about the size of a bread box and you just kind of drop the cards in there and shake them up. I think a somewhat disappointing thing, you can't actually shuffle a cube by putting it in a metal box and shaking it. It doesn't actually like randomize it in any meaningful way.
But it's
But it is kind of
satisfying.
fun to like it is, and you pass it around the table, and everyone gives it a shake, and it's fun. And it's covered in stickers and spray paint, and there was a while where I was considering tossing in like some nuts and bolts and like a handful of sand and stuff just to, but then if I bring it to someone else's house or like a cube draft, I don't want to dump sand out on someone's floor.
Yeah, why is your cube box in another plastic bag? Yeah, don't worry about
Right. You'll see, you'll see.
that.
Uh, but again, like it's fun and it sets the stage a little bit and you know it kind of it like builds up a mystique a little bit. You know, I mean, you interviewed Roja, who's that also drafts in Philadelphia, and you know her rusted cash box of Goblin's Cube, like has a similar kind of thing where it's just like here's this like goofy, you know, it's a metal box, like it's not what you expect the things in, but it really it kind of it fits the theme of it, and you know when you pull it out, it makes it a little bit exciting, I think, from the get-go.
But it also nails, like you said, that sense or that feeling. Oh, you want to play a cube that is about what is it? My world is fire and pain, and so it's like, all right,
Fire and Blood. Yeah.
fire and blood. There it is. It's like you get to grab the metal box and
Here
crunch
it
the cards.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
that's
I
perfect.
mean, people claim that it smells a little bit like gunpowder still. I don't know if I believe that, but
If you
it's
use
fun.
gunpowder instead of sand, you have different challenges. You have to no smoking with this cube. So as you've engaged with new sets, you mentioned Furiosa not all that long ago, but new cards coming into the cube. How do you engage with like some of the new cards that fit this aesthetic, like Ether Drift or like Duskboard, maybe?
Yeah. Well, okay. So keeping to like my aesthetic limitations again kind of keeps me honest. I mean, honestly, like when Aether Drift came out, I was kind of shocked at how few cards
Mm.
went in the cube. Mostly from the art. I mean, I think like they kind of advertised it as a like Death Race 2000. It looked way more like Mario Kart, which is fine. Like I love Mario Kart. It's a great game. But in the end, like I don't think there are much more than like 10 or 12 cards from that set. And people were joking with me as like, "Oh, here's your set finally. You can retire your cube." Um, but you know, it turned out to not quite be the case. And I'm often like kind of surprised at which sets kind of fill in some aesthetic holes for the cube. So when Final Fantasy came out, the Regalia, the vehicle that it, you know, the art is just like it's from one of the Final Fantasy games I haven't even played, but it's like just like three kind of punk rock looking dudes in a car or something like that. But it's like they're driving through the desert on a flat road, which is like looks a lot like a scene from the first Mad Max movie, which I really haven't like I feel like you know you kind of index for the later movies where it's an actual wasteland and you don't get as much of the like there's still a little bit of society and he's a police officer and all this other stuff from the first one, and was able to kind of like pull that card in. I mean, like it's not super exciting mechanically what it does, but the art for it like really gets kind of like what almost feels like a still from that movie and kind of pulls it in. So yeah, I was not expecting a Final Fantasy card to come in, and it did. I feel like I'm one of the few people who was excited about the Fallout set because that was another good one, like, you know, deserts and mohawks and weird guns and stuff. So like I pulled a bunch of cards from that. And then sometimes it'll be kind of few and far between for something else. I don't think there's a single Dustmorn card in there.
Mm.
Outlaws of Thunder Junction sort of like brought in a bunch of new deserts, which was kind of exciting. I hadn't had dual lands in there before, so it allowed me to pull in some dual lands. And I think that ultimately that meant my blue count went down because it made it a little
Mm.
bit easier to draft blue cards. So I sort of lowered my support for blue land a little bit even further.
Too easy now.
Um,
Yeah.
too easy. It was too easy. And then also like the bounce deserts and stuff like that, which sort of made some of the like coming the sun scorched desert a little bit more of an effective card and stuff. So that was, you know, so like I'm often shocked at like what sets actually have something that fits the themes for it, and then trying to find ways to work that into the mechanics.
Well, and it sounds like you're okay with Universes Beyond as well, as long as it aesthetically fits what you're after.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's at the same time
Folks
like
at home can't see you shrugging like that. That's it's a great.
yeah. As a retail drafter, I'm not super excited about Universes Beyond, but like a thing I like about Cube is it's very much opt-in. You know, you sit down at a commander table and like someone might pull out Optimus Prime or whatever, and you're like, I like dragons. Like, what is this transforming robot thing? But like, you know, in a cube, like, you know, you're opting in for what you're gonna interact with. You can look at the whole list, like whatever, and you can say, like, this is for me, this is not for me. That's something I really appreciate, and I think it, you know, something is I feel like I'm pretty forward with, and you know, you can tell I try to keep my Cube Cobra list. You know, like there's a Fallout card in here, like Battle Bus is on there.
Yep.
Like if you don't like Fallout cards, like that's fine. You can protest my cube. I understand.
I feel like that would not be the thing people would protest in an
Yeah,
environment like this.
I guess it's fine. We like Fortnite.
This is fine.
Yeah, yeah, I recognize that like when people say like, well, the first expansion, what you know, Arabian Nights, like that's a Universes Beyond set or whatever. Like I don't particularly like that argument, but you know, I mean, I think Magic's cool because it's such like a simple and like good skeleton of a game. Like it's you know, it's just simulating two wizards casting spells at each other. And it doesn't take too much to kind of tweak it above and beyond that. I mean, Commander is like, okay, so now it's like four armies or whatever. And it like ultimately there aren't that many changes to the rules and stuff. So I think like if you're making some mechanical changes to the game, like it feels different. I feel like it's appropriate to like change the setting to kind of go with like we're not a wizard duel anymore. We're like, desperately scrounging for resources. So
Yeah.
it feels a little bit appropriate. Like this is a similar game built on the pre-existing game.
Yeah, the bones are there, and honestly, the fact that so many different stories and ideas and IPs have found their way into a game like this, and it like doesn't compromise the game engine at all, is pretty
Yeah.
amazing. Well, you mentioned just a moment ago about like the deserts and adding into the lands here. I'd love to talk about your mana base a little bit. So you picked up all the deserts from Outlaws of Thunder Junction, but you
Mhm.
have a whole wealth of the tapped deserts from
Yeah.
Amonkhet. How did you land in this spot?
Yeah, I mean, I think I really like the idea of tapped lands, particularly tapped lands for color. Again, because it makes, you're desperate for the color resources. And then also like it means that the early phases of the game are quite a bit slower. And I think like, it's an adventure movie. It's like, there's a couple of opening scenes and like, someone's like looking at the wasteland and then they go into a little trading spot and they have to take all their guns out and put them on the, counter or whatever. And like it's a slower start to it, and then things kind of ramp up around your like fourth or fifth turn where people can actually cast the spells in their hand. And I think like I've found that like newer players and draft sickos are the people who like the cube the most because it's like the cards are actually like relatively simple and the gameplay is actually pretty slow. So someone who's like still learning the game, like you play a big wall and you're like, all right, well, no one's going to attack me for a while, so I can like strategize and think about what I'm doing. And I think like having that slower mana base kind of feeds that pretty well. And also like they have cycling. So, it's difficult. I think like in a desert environment and in a desert environment where you haven't built your deck, or haven't like been able to pull cards out of your deck, I think like Mana Screw and Mana Flood are like even worse than they would, or feel even worse than they would be in like the cycling on so many of the lands. Kind of helps mitigate that a little bit, and also kind of turns into a deck itself where there's like some cycling payoffs and stuff in it, and you can get those through the lands, which I think is a fun kind of contour to it.
Yeah, and I love how hurtful the deserts are in particular because you have to have the color they are to cycle them, so you can't get away with the one off.
Yep, yep, yep. Makes it a little bit more desperate. And again, like intentionally, there's enough deserts for everyone to have 17, and everybody needs 19. So you're already feeling a little bit short from it. And I've been fiddling with the balance of it a little bit, particularly bringing the desert duels in and trying to make sure that like it's still not making it too easy, particularly to play blue. So I don't include any of the green, the ones that touch green at all. So there's
Mhm.
still no land green production, except for I think Survivor's Encampment can make green mana in some situations. And also the deserts that allow you to discard other deserts to have effects, also from Amonkhet. Again, that's kind of like just a fun way to use the lands a little bit and sort of, you can kind of build a desert deck in a desert cube.
Well, I think like the deserts speak to this a lot too, but you also do a whole lot with breaking singleton in this environment, like to a pretty high degree. I mean, you're going to see three, four, or more
Yeah, and
copies.
I mean, some of that is just like desperation. I mean, I need to get to 360 cards, and like, there's just not enough things that fit my theme.
Dan, I have to say that's like the best reason in all of this, where it's like I'm really working to be aesthetically and mechanically thoughtful. Hey, why'd you do this? I was desperate, man. Like,
My restrictions hold me back. No, but I mean, I think like some of it kind of works. I mean, like, if you look at Road Warrior, Mad Max 2, for instance, like, and Fury Road, like it's hard, like the bad guys, they're all identical. Like it's all just a bunch of bald dudes and so, yeah, and stuff. So I mean, I think like, having Whisper Squad, like you could see 7 or 8 Whisper Squads in your deck and like just have a bunch of like identical punks on bikes, and I think like that kind of like feeds the aesthetics of it a little bit. And then human soldiers are harder to come across than you'd think, particularly like human soldiers that aren't like obviously fantasy human soldiers. I'm really kind of limited to some early 2000s sets and a couple of the Portal sets for cards that kind of fit that theme. Portal 2 has been a huge, or was a huge source of cards also, because that's one of the ones where they all have guns for some reason
that's
in the
right.
art.
Like, you actually get the musketeer is in here,
Yeah.
there's somebody else with a rifle that I forget, but yeah, it's just, like, really amazing.
And rifles. Yeah.
And did you use the duplicates not just out of desperation, but also to kind of try to push themes that way? I know, like, I see, multiples of things like Ruthless Sniper or, Recommission.
Yeah, and it pushed the soldiers theme quite a bit. Recommission was something I wanted to make sure that I had enough of, and I think like the type of removal that I'm looking for. I mean, like like flatten and like some artifact destructions and some different stuff like that. I think like breaking Singleton for that, I think has filled in what I need while I'm kind of waiting for more art to come out. Actually, just got a couple of trades. I'll be swapping a couple of my duplicates out for some singletons, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. I've like kind of found some more art that works.
So do you have to now fatigue those cards to make them blend with the others in the box?
I mean, it's kind of fun that like there's such a variety of cards, and I feel like the ones that have stuck around longest, there's a bit of more story to them because they're worn down.
Hey, as long as they're intact, they'll play.
Exactly.
I do want to talk about the no deck building component of this because I think that's really fascinating. And I know a lot of people have endeavored to design projects like this. Was that something you set out to accomplish, or did that evolve from the experience?
I think that evolved a little bit from the experience. I mean, I think I was trying to push the desperation of it all. And again, like I wanted the draft to be a big part of the fun. I mean, I think that, you talk to people who like say like, I don't need to play the games. I just like the draft part of it or whatever. And I kind of wanted to push that a little bit more and say like, okay, well, like what if the draft was even more important because like you don't get to build things. Like you have to be really thoughtful about what you're
Mm.
drafting and again, like that idea of like a scramble for resources. You start out and you're in competition from the beginning. And like, I mean, I feel like it sometimes even encourages like a little bit of hate drafting. Like there's always someone who like, shows up at the tables like, I'm just gonna take every land I see or whatever, and you get
It's the
30
perennial
lands.
desert experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, like that sort of becomes part of the gameplay of it all. Because like, I mean, if you're pulling out deck building, like that's also a fun component of it. And I think like that's part of the cube experience. So you kind of have to give your players something back in return. And I think like the draft becomes a little bit more intense. And then there's the like, you flip your drafted cards over and like count your lands and just hope that like, there's enough pips, like the pips and the lands match up in some way. I think like is also kind of a fun experience for it and just kind of appeals to like more experienced drafters. I really wanted that to be part of the gameplay from pretty early on. I mean, like I said, I started with the art and then started putting the mechanics together and just kind of realized like, okay, I need to fiddle around with this a little bit. I don't want a full like what do they call it, like clown shoes cube where I'm like changing real fundamental rules, but I think pulling out a step of the process kind of made it a little bit more fun, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, it's a huge change for like not a lot of explaining. You're like, yep,
Mhm.
you just don't deck build. That's it.
Yeah. Well, I think like it's also is a thing that kind of makes it a little bit more inviting for newer players where it's like, deck building can be really hard and particularly like with a cube, like a singleton environment with complicated, powerful cards, like it's hard to put a deck together and it's hard to put a mana base together and stuff. And it's like this just it's skipped over. Like you whatever you drafted, you have and that goes in your deck. And it sort of takes some of the pressure off. It's like, well, I lost because I have these blue cards and I have no blue lands and it's not my fault. Um,
It it
uh,
wasn't my fault. It was the wasteland's fault.
it was the Wasteland's fault, exactly.
Did you tinker with numbers any as you were exploring that process, or did it just kind of fit naturally at the 3 by 15 like a normal draft?
It's simple. It's what people expect and stuff. And I think like if you're throwing so many curveballs at people and if it's a weird enough environment, like you do need to, make sure that you're not like, okay, we're doing 4 packs and 9 or whatever. And I think like it just adds a layer of complication, I think. And I know a lot of desert cubes like it's 16 card packs or you get 4 packs of 12 or something like so you're trying to see more cards and make sure that everyone's got your cards and stuff. But at the same time, like that extends the draft period out a little bit longer. Like I see why people do that or why designers do that when they're doing a more traditional desert environment and stuff. But I think like this one without the deck building, keeping that like what people expect, I think is helpful. And I don't really feel like I need to go down to the 14 cards because the play boosters are, because like I feel like 15's the number we've been working with for so long. So why change it?
We're desperate enough. It's all you don't need to probably don't need to push more than that.
Right.
So is this a project that you intend to keep updating? I know you joke that your friends were talking about, retiring the cube, but some were like, hey, you've solved it now. Like, is that something that you want to keep working on?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, like it's fun. Like it's neat. Like I have some other cubes that I keep up with, and I'm always looking for new cards for, and it is kind of fun just the back of my mind. Like, okay, is there a desert background? Is there like, someone with too many wallet chains? Like, where's the like, is there a vehicle in this set that looks like it could be a real world vehicle or something from the A team or whatever, and sort of kind of what works from that.
Well, Dan, I love that this is a cube about storytelling in a way, capturing this feeling of your upbringing. Not that your upbringing was like Mad Max, but that it was that
There
it
are
was a part
moments.
of that it was a part of your experience, right? Are there other stories like that you want to tell, or is this like kind of a unique thing you're wanting to do in your cube space?
So I'm fiddling around with. I really enjoyed Duskborn a lot. I really like horror movies. I liked that set a lot. It was a lot of fun to draft. There's some cards in it that felt a little bit strange for me, and I've been working on I guess like a set cube for that. That basically like sort of rebalancing the archetypes a little bit, sort of making Selesnya a little bit more playable, and adding a bonus sheet that's references to other horror movies that has been kind of fun. So I mean, it's that you're sort of stepping into someone else's stuff and just sort of adding little flourishes to it or whatever. And I've been fiddling around with like different draft environments for that. So the working title for the cube is Freddy versus Predator versus Midsommar Days Later 3 Season of the Witch is the name of the cube. And I really just I
So
like
good.
the mashup of horror movies. And again, like it's sort of thinking about like what's a horror movie to me. And I think, a kid in the 80s and the 90s, like a lot of the horror movies that I saw on TV, and they chopped out all sorts of like the exciting parts, and there were commercial breaks, and it was a mess. And then you watch it on VHS later, and then, the DVD director's edition comes out and stuff, and like you get, more and more movies. So I'm working on this cube as like three different draft environments. So, one that's just the commons and uncommons, and that's my world TV premiere version of it. Sort of the very stripped down version of the cube, just sort of like cards that I've rebalanced a little bit and, made the rooms a little bit more of a viable, I think, a viable archetype, pulled out a lot of the rares that don't actually matter, all the rares total.
Mm,
Then the original theatrical release, which is adding rares into that, and then the director's cut, which is that plus the bonus sheet that has, Scarecrow and, the Season of the Witch card and like all, Dawn of the Dead, which I didn't even realize was a
sure.
magic card, but it's a magic card called Dawn of the Dead. And stuff, and like putting those cards into it and stuff. So kind of like the three different ways that you can kind of experience a horror movie as a cube.
No, I love that. Well, and I love taking a real world experience like that and translating it into a game mechanic, and not in a way that's like, I mean, it doesn't sound ham-fisted to me. Like you're taking something that's meaningful and translating it through the medium that people are already familiar with in the game.
Yeah, yeah. It's fun. And it's just sort of a fun celebration of a set that I liked quite a bit and, trying to sort of just add my little flourish onto it.
Well, Dan, as we think about these stories you're telling, these worlds you're building and unbuilding, I guess, what advice would you want to share with other designers as they're considering their own cube projects?
Yeah, I mean, play and iterate and, share your ideas and be open to other people's ideas. I think like I couldn't even list the number of people who have given me fun recommendations for the Mad Max Cube. I think like every time I draft it, someone's got some idea for like, hey, have you tried this? Or like, hey, there's no Tinker target. You have Tinker, but there's no Tinker targets. Like, here's a list of things you might want to try. And I think like I'm just indebted to so many people, like everyone who's ever drafted it. I think like it helps feed the experience, and just being open to feedback, and not being super precious with like I put this card in, it needs to stay forever or whatever, but like if this is making it a miserable experience for people, or if it's not sort of serving my goal, like being willing to take it out and finding that balance of like sort of being humble with it, but also wanting to kind of stick to like this is my design, and this is important to me, and I want it to work this way. This is my line that I won't cross. I think it is important, and I think like helps differentiate cubes and kind of makes your environments your fun, cool environments that other people can build from and iterate on also. And I think that's cool. I love Cube Cobra because you can share your list and look at other people's lists, and I've cloned cubes and people have cloned my cubes, and I think like that's flattering and fun, and it's neat to see where people kind of fork off doing something different.
And how exciting when you get something like this that is high friction in a lot of ways that inspires somebody else to go, I could make this a flavor I'm excited about too. You know?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's fun.
Well, Dan, this has been so much fun, and I'm so thrilled we got the chance to go through all this. Before I let you go, I do want to ask you one of my favorite questions, which is if you could have any card printed as a promo, what card would you pick and who would you have do the illustration?
Well, as I've said, Aether Drift was kind of fun for me, but also a bit of a disappointment. And the biggest problem that I have with that set is the card Push the Limit, which is the absolute perfect card for the Mad Max Cube. It puts all of your vehicles back into play, crews them, gives them haste. It's just mechanically exactly what I want. It's expensive, it's red, it fits in every possible way except for the art. The art is a bunch of chariots being pulled by hippopotamuses. And I think there's someone like like rollerblading behind it or something ridiculous like that.
That is true. I didn't notice that before. That's amazing.
The further you look at this art, the less appropriate it is for the Mad Max Cube. And so this has been my major gripe, and I think like the only card that I've ever like considered like, okay, what if I just like taped something over top of it, which doesn't work in an unsleeved cube as well. So I would love for that recent like bulk uncommon to be reprinted as a promo. And I think for an artist, Rudy Obero, who is the artist who did a bunch of the different posters for Mad Max 2, Road Warrior, I think would be a great artist for it. His art is very 80s. It's very like muscly, shirtless dudes with, chrome vehicles all over the place and lots of weapons. And I think like the poster in particular it has just the bodies of Max and Lord Humongous sort of like on two sides of the image with, a souped up tractor trailer sort of speeding down between their two bodies and they're, gleaming and muscly and stuff. That aesthetic is kind of perfect. So if we bring that guy out of retirement and actually I'm not sure he's still alive, but this person get that art on Push the Limit and I would be very happy.
I am looking at this art maybe for the first time, and that is amazing.
It's incredible.
With the giant bold letters scrawled, "Just one man can make a difference."
Exactly.
Rudy Abrero, Push the Limit. That's so good.
That's what I'd like to see.
Well, Dan, thank you so much. You are a delight. The Mad Max Cube is a delight in its own malicious way. Thank you for sharing it with us, for guiding us through the experience. If folks want to explore the wasteland for themselves, maybe go take a poke at the horror cube that you're building, or perhaps see any of the other stuff you're working on, where would be the best place for us to point them?
Cube Cobra is probably the best place. I am on a couple of Discord servers. I'm on the Cube Talk Discord server. I do a lot of lurking and not a whole lot of posting. But if anyone pings me, tags me, whatever, I'm not sure the nomenclature, contact me on that. I'm happy to respond. I don't really have much of a social network or social media presence above and beyond a little bit of Discord and Cube Cobra. So Dan Consiglio on both of those.
Perfect. Hey, that's a good way to be, just our quiet little cube corner of the internet.
Exactly.
Well, Dan, again, thank you so much. This has been awesome. I'm so grateful to you. Here's hoping there are more chances for us to try to restock on gasoline and explosives, either competitively or cooperatively as the opportunities come up.
Yeah, Kate, that was a lot of fun. Yeah, thanks so much. I really appreciate the interview. And like I said, I'm flattered that you reached out and that was a lot of fun. Thanks.